Hey everybody, this is part of our full-length primetime podcast. You can check it out on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, YouTube, plenty more. I hope you enjoy.
And Brandon, we're going to move on into our next topic. We're talking about basketball. And our next two topics are on the hardwood, the hard court of college basketball. And we're going to go to the Pac-12, a conference in football we don't really go to unless we're talking about Washington this past year. But I was looking at the standings just to kind of get a gauge on the Arizona Wildcats who we're talking about in this one. The Pac-12 is stacked, man. Oregon, Arizona, UCLA is good this year. And those last two teams, Arizona and UCLA, played recently. And UCLA got beat. They lost 96-85 on their home court. And the big storyline for Arizona is they returned their sophomore guard, Allonzo, who came off the bench and in that game played 27 minutes, scoring only 12 points, 4 assists, getting 7 defensive rebounds, 7 rebounds overall, didn't get an offensive one. Went 4 of 10 in that game. The Wildcats shot 50% from the field that night. But Brandon, I'm going to ask you this, and it's kind of because of the win, kind of with the addition of Trier coming back from the PED suspension for why he missed the first part of this season. I'll ask you this simple question. Does Allonzo Trier make this Arizona Wildcat team a Final Four contender?
I think he certainly could. And the reason I say that is because not only is he a solid scorer, I mean, if you take a look at him, you take a look at last season, you take a look at what he did last season. He returns this year, and you're hoping that you get what you got out of him last season. He's a go-to scorer. He's a guy that can open up the floor for other guys, and I think that that's what's really important. I think it gives Coach Miller a lot of options. I think it really gives him a lot more options because he can start Trier, he can bring him in off the bench. I think that it's a really good thing for Arizona. I think it's a really good thing for them, and I think that he certainly, with everything that he brings and the way that they played against UCLA, I think that they absolutely have a chance to be a Final Four contender if he's able to stay out there and if he's able to continue to bring the production that he brings. Again, you say, only 12 points. Again, that's coming off the bench. 12 points. I think he only had 1 turnover, and I think that's a big thing too to look at. Only 1 turnover. I think that moving forward, if he is able to continue to do this and open up the floor and be the defender that he can be and defend some of the bigger guys on the wing, I think that is going to be huge for this Arizona team. And you take a look at them. This UCLA team scores a whole heck of a lot of points.
And they
held them down.
They also have a guy in Lonzo Ball, not Allonzo Ball, Lonzo Ball, who on the fast break and for draft this year, we've been talking about who's the number 1 player in this draft class, Ball or Markelle Fultz. I always say Fultz and I want to say Fultz, but both Pac-12 guys also, they have that guy on that UCLA team, and Arizona was able to beat them. That's a whole different story Arizona showed how you beat UCLA, but Arizona got a statement win in that one. And, I mean, Allonzo Trier, as he comes back, it's more acclimated. They get him into the starting lineup. Hell, they don't even, in my opinion, they don't even need him in the starting lineup if they don't want to. Of course, you're going to try to get him in there because he's a quality player. But if he can give you at least 27 quality minutes a night, maybe even more, maybe into the 30 range off the bench, wouldn't you like that? Wouldn't you like that in a 6-man? If you can have that luxury to have him be a 6-man. I mean, if you don't have that luxury, have him start. But even as a 6-man, he can help this team.
Trier is the top returning scorer to Arizona from last season.
Of course he's going to start.
But no, what I was going to say, there you go again. You always think you know what the other person's going to say, but you're very bad. But what I'm saying is that, kind of going to your point, is if they have the luxury and if they can bring him in as the 6-man, if you're already up in that game, if you already have the momentum in a game and you bring in Trier, What's that going to do for you? Talk about a spark plug off the bench. That would be huge. Again, not a lot of teams are able to have a luxury like that, and most likely you want to kickstart your game with having that guy in there, that spark plug in there to start the game. But it would be something interesting to bring him in off the bench, in different games and stuff like that, and just see how it works. But I think that clearly it worked well in this one. They beat UCLA, the number 3 team at the time, and Arizona was 14. They jumped all the way to 7.
Well, and I look at where they are right now in the bracketology, and right now Joe Lunardi has them as a number 2 seed. So right now, if you're unfamiliar, you haven't looked at Joe Lunardi's bracketology, of course this is going to change daily, but at this point, at what time is this? 7:02 Central Time here on Monday.
Don't lie to him. 7:07.
Here's what they are. 7:07 now. I thought that looked like a 2. 7:07 Central Time here on Monday here in Chicago. But the number 1 seeds that Joe Lunardi has: Villanova, Kansas, Kentucky, Baylor. His number 2 seeds are North Carolina, Arizona, Gonzaga, and Florida State. So just to give you a little reference of where some of the top teams are, but Zona, a number 2 team. And if I go over and you look at that thing we talked about last week in RPI, their RPI right now is a 66.82. Strength of schedule overall, a 59.53. What's their record against the top 50? 3-2. The only losses, they lost by 4 points to Butler on a neutral court, and they lost by, what would that math be? About 7 points to Gonzaga on a neutral court back in November and early December. So you look at those losses. They beat Southern Cal on the road. They beat UCLA on the road. They beat Michigan State by 2 points on a neutral court. Those were their top 50 wins. And then outside the top 50, 51 to 100, 6-0. And then teams 101 to 200, 6-0. Teams 201 plus, 3-0. So their only losses in the top 200 are to the number 4 ranked team at the time, number 10 ranked team, according to the CBS kind of RPI graph that they have here for Arizona. So looking at that, moving forward, they already have that on the docket, on the resume. You get Allonzo back, you get some more key wins in this nice and kind of pactful and like competitive Pac-12. You're going to be a lock for the tournament. And this could be a team that maybe, Final Four is, of course, beyond this, but this could be an Arizona team that we're talking on Selection Sunday. We're sitting there going, are they going to get a 1 seed? Are they going to be a 1 seed? Because right now, out of the 4 1 seeds that Joe Lunardi has, that Baylor one doesn't look that strong to me. Kentucky, Kansas, and Villanova are kind of strong right now. Maybe Arizona sneaks into that 4 number 1 spot.
Well, I'll be honest with you. They've got 2 remaining games on their schedule that I'm looking at, really licking my chops, and I know Arizona has to be too. February 4th on the road at Oregon.
Only time they'll play Oregon.
And then February 25th at home, UCLA. You got to remember, they beat UCLA at their place. And they'll get them at home in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
Second to last game of the regular season. Those are 2 games. If they win both of those games, I don't see how they're not a number 1. I don't see how they're not a number 1. This Oregon team, very good team. Very good team. UCLA, very good team. And you already beat them once. I think that if you can beat both of those teams with taking care of business with the rest of them.
Taking care of business.
I think it's tough to turn the other way if someone says, hey, this Arizona team, this could be a legit number 1 seed. I don't think you're going to see too many people then. If they can do what I'm saying they can do, they're not going to have too many people that go, no, I don't think so. There will be a lot of people intrigued by Arizona as a number 1.
Well, and really to me, it comes down to one of those games that you said, and I'll give you a hint. It's not the UCLA one. It's all about that Oregon game on the 4th, because the big thing right now as we are recording this podcast on, what's today's date? The 23rd of January. You look at the standings for the Pac-12 Arizona 7-0 in the conference, Oregon 7-0 in the conference. If Arizona, let's say, wins that game, they would pretty much be a lock to me because I don't think they're going to lose I don't think they lose more than 2. If they lose 2, it's to UCLA and Oregon, maybe even a Southern Cal, but this team is good. This team, I think, is not going to get upset by the Washington States and the Arizona States and the Oregon States, and no big upsets are going to happen to Arizona in the regular season. If they get that win, going into the Pac-12 Conference Tournament as the number 1 seed, that's going to be pretty nice. However, if they lose that game, if they lose it, to me for sure, I mean, a lot of things can still happen. Oregon still has games on their schedule. I mean, leading up to that Arizona game, I don't see them losing at Utah, at Colorado, or home against Arizona State. I think Oregon is going to go into that Arizona game being undefeated, being 10-0 in the Pac-12, but they still got UCLA on the road right after they play the number 7. So they got number 7 and number 8 back-to-back right now. Then they got to go on the road at USC. So these teams playing those 3 tough teams that I think in this conference, Oregon's got them back-to-back-to-back. If Oregon can beat Arizona and then just get through UCLA or the Trojans with both wins or a loss, then Oregon gets the number 1 seed. So I think that February 4th, Saturday, February 4th, is for the number 1 seed in the Pac-12 tournament. But if Arizona loses that game also, and then they lose to a UCLA, then they could be in, okay, now they can fall to a 3 seed, maybe even a 4th seed. So it's a close conference. It's a competitive conference. But I think with Arizona, and I think this isn't too bold to say, and we're not going to boldly go where no one's gone before on this one, but if they win that September 4th game at Eugene, they will be the number 1 team in the Pac-12 conference. And with that being said, if they then win the conference tournament, there's no way they're not a 1 seed.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that I think that it's a good thing that we're putting a lot of stock into the game against Oregon. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing that we're putting a lot of stock into the game against UCLA. But I think, though, too, is that you cannot forget about a team like USC. You cannot forget about a team like Utah or even Cal that have still been competitive. They're not up there at the top, but they've been competitive.
And Cal's going to be fighting. Like, I think Cal, as we get later into this season a little bit, they're going to be one of those teams where it's like, we got to get scrappy because we're trying to fight for a tournament spot. So they could be not desperate, but a dangerous team just for, if we get this win, that would solidify us either in the tournament or in one of the first 4 games. So Cal right now, they're on the bubble right now as we're recording this podcast. They could just be, that's a team where I said no upsets. I'll correct myself. That's a team. Cal is an upset-worthy team in my mind in this conference.
I guess I just think when you take a look at this conference, you look at it's pretty good in the top 5 or 6. I mean, you look at Arizona, Oregon, UCLA, Utah, Cal, and even USC. 17-4 overall, all 4 losses within the conference. Not great, but I think that you take a look at all those teams, and all those teams at any time, they could come up, they could sneak up, and they could get you. They could get you. And I think that that's why this conference, this Pac-12 conference, is really exciting right now. And that's also why I'm making this case, saying that those 2 games for Arizona, Oregon, and UCLA again at home, they're huge games. You've got to win those if you want a number 1 seed. But do not forget about the other games. Do not forget about those other games that you have coming up. But it's the same thing for Oregon, too. You cannot forget about those other games because Oregon, they've still got a couple of games coming up, some big ones. That one against Arizona is going to be a huge one. They get to play it at home. But I think that those other games will be very impactful as well, and those could be some dogfights.
Well, and the thing I want to say about that Oregon game before we kind of move on into, I want to touch a little bit of Arizona and in the tournament to kind of close out the segment. The one player I'm looking at in that game, and you might say, well, Ricky, he has been a little bit cooled off since, but Dylan Brooks, a guy for Oregon that Arizona's going to have to look at for that February 4th game. And I mean, I'm sure that Coach Weber and the rest of our Coach Miller, and the rest of that Wildcat coaching staff knows what to do. They know that Dylan Brooks is a guy we look at and could kill you. In that UCLA game, played 35 minutes, had 23 points, probably the biggest three coming at the end of that game. Oh, wait, where was that game? In Eugene. Then the next game, he plays 24, has 28 points, went 9 of 10 from the field, only missed one shot. Where was that game? Eugene. I know, like, he went 8 points, 7 points against Washington State, 11 against Oregon State, only 10 against Cal. Didn't play against Stanford. But if Dylan Brooks is suiting up for that game, from what I've seen this season, the kid at home against primetime opponents shows up to that one. So that's going to be, if Dylan Brooks suits up for it, I mean, injuries and anything that keeps him out of the game, of course, you don't have to focus on him. But he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if it's like Arizona, Oregon tied, last second shot, Dylan Brooks wins it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the storyline we're sitting at. But that September 4th game, I don't know if I have plans that day, Brandon, but if I do, I might be calling in sick because I got to watch that game for the Pac-12. But the last thing I want to look at with Arizona is kind of that complete bring it full circle with what I mentioned at the beginning. Can they make a Final Four run? And for me, the big thing that I look at, and you know me, Brandon, I did it last week when we looked at West Virginia. Can they make a deep tournament run? I'm doing it now. I look at the history. And the one thing to me, the overclouding thought in my head throughout my entire, I'm going to say from childhood, from like, I want to say it's 2003 or 2004 until now, the thing I always remember the Wildcats for is being really pumped up, people pumping them up for the tournament, and then they lose. 2008, first round exit to West Virginia. 2009, our regional semifinal exit to Louisville. Last year, first round exit to Wichita State. Now, they did have, before I have Wildcat fans jump all over me.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, they did go to the Final Four. They did lose to a good Wisconsin team. And even 2000.
Was it Final Four or was it Elite Eight?
It was the regional semifinal, so it was the Elite Eight. Still, really far into the tournament, lost to a good Wisconsin team. They did the same thing in 2011, losing to, I want to say, the eventual champion UConn Huskies that year in the 2011 national tournament. And that was one where they beat down Duke. They got through Texas by a point. They beat Memphis by 2 points that year. And even 2 years ago, they beat an Ohio State team, a Musketeer team in Xavier that was pretty good. Then they just lost to Wisconsin, who we all know where they went to. They went to the national championship. But that's the thing to me. The thing that I remember Arizona throughout my early days of being a basketball fan is that they get upset before they get to the regional. And then when they get to the regional, they lose in the regional final. So with that history, does that play a little bit of a part in when you answer the question, I know it's a different team, but can this team make that Final Four run? Does history play anything into that, especially when the coach hasn't changed? Like, he's still the coach that's been here for days.
Well, one thing that I want to point out is that back in the 2014-2015 season when they did make it to the Elite Eight and they lost to Wisconsin, in the Pac-12 tournament, they ran the table. I mean, the Cal blew them out. UCLA, close game, beat them 70-64. Oregon blew them out in the championship game. They went into that tournament with a lot of momentum. Texas Southern beat them pretty good. Ohio State beat them pretty good. 8-point win to Xavier. And then a tough loss by 7 points to Wisconsin. Now, last year, they didn't do so well in the Pac-12 tournament. They didn't even make it to the championship game. And then they go into that game against Wichita State. Wichita State really played well, and they got them. And I think that what Arizona needs to do is they need to be able to play really well in that Pac-12 tournament, win the Pac-12 tournament, be the champs of the Pac-12, and take that momentum into the tournament. They've got to be able to do that. They had something really good going in that 14-15 season. They need to try and be able to have that going again.
Well, and for me, the big thing is, I do agree with you. They need to, the big one is the first step, win at Oregon. Because I think if you win at Oregon, you set everything up.
If you win in the trees.
Yeah, if you win in the trees, you become the number 1 seed. I tried to rhyme there. It didn't quite work out. And then you be the number 1 seed for the conference tournament. If you can make a run in that conference tournament, there is no way that you are not a number 1 seed when we get to the national tournament. And that's something that may set up the Arizona Wildcats for a good kind of run in the tournament. And the one thing I am looking up, because I want to look up the exact date for this, a little pop quiz for you, Brandon, to end this segment. Do you know my favorite game? My favorite game featuring an Arizona Wildcat team. Featuring Arizona Wildcats.
Yes, I do. And it's the Illinois game.
Bingo. 2005, March 26th, when we won by 1 single point in overtime. I believe that was the one where Arizona had that game in hand, or so they thought, and we made the comeback to push it to overtime. Man, that was a good Illinois team.
It was crazy. It was crazy.
It was a good Illinois team.
What's going on? Why aren't there more Illinois teams like that? What happened to those days?
We need D. Brown to come back. We need Darren Williams. We need Luther Head. We need James Augustine. We need Powell to come back. We just need to get the band back together, run the table, and then lose to the Tar Heels in the national title game.
Sure, yeah.
And I believe that was that Sean Mays or is that big babyface Davis? I think it was Mays that was on that Tar Heel team. But this is where you guys come in. Let me know down below what you guys think. Also, if you haven't seen it, you're too young, don't remember, check out that Illinois-Arizona kind of clip and just bathe in the glory that used to be Illinois basketball. You knew Wildcat fans that I'd throw that in right at the end.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed a lot of emotion. If you want more, click this video right over my left shoulder. You will certainly not regret it.